Okay, so there was a major storyline to come out of the college basketball weekend, and that was Baylor, a team that many times I have went on this show and told you guys they are the best team in college basketball. They actually took their first loss of the season on Saturday night to Kansas. And a lot of people have been asking me, Zach, what does this loss mean for Baylor? Does this mean that they are not the best team in college basketball anymore? Should we be panicking and all of that good stuff? And I'll start off by saying this. Baylor fans, it's okay. Just take a deep breath and relax, because unfortunately, even though you guys lost your first game of the season against Kansas, and it was a tough, hard-fought game. Kansas ended up taking it 71-58. I think that long-term, this loss isn't the worst thing in the world for Baylor if, and very importantly, if they could learn from their mistakes, regroup, and get going by March. And I think that ultimately, a team like Baylor, full of experienced players, they have the ability to do that. There's a reason why this team going into this game against Kansas was 18-0. There was a reason why last year I thought they were the most consistent team in college basketball from start to finish, and they obviously brought back a lot of that core to this year's squad. But watching this game for Baylor against Kansas and watching Baylor a little bit against Iowa State, I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm just saying it is clear that COVID and the COVID protocols have really caught up with this team. And let's not forget, this obviously was not the first time that Baylor has been dealing with COVID issues. To start the season, Baylor was going to participate in that event with Villanova and Arizona State, but unfortunately, Scott Drew tested positive right before the start of the season, so Baylor couldn't participate in that event. Then we all remember they were going to play Gonzaga. It was supposed to be the game of the season. We were all super excited for it, and game gets canceled because of COVID. So that is the second COVID-related issue to occur within the Baylor Bear program. Then they have a game canceled against Texas. They had a game canceled against West Virginia. They had a game canceled against Oklahoma. Had a game canceled against West Virginia that's going to be made up. And prior to the game against Iowa State on Wednesday night, where they only won by 5, and keep in mind, that score just looks off because Baylor only won by 5, and Iowa State is not only probably the worst team in the Big 12 now that Kansas State picked up the big-time win over the Oklahoma Sooners, but also Baylor was only able to win that game by 5, and if you watched it, they didn't look themselves throughout. And I kind of think in this game against Kansas, it was another occasion where you saw the effects of COVID and how much that really killed Baylor in preparation for this game, because Kansas looked quicker, they looked faster, they looked more motivated, and for Baylor, I do think that a lot of times when you're going into the tournament and you're leading up to the NCAA tournament like we are right now, you need maybe something to refocus yourself on. It would have been very easy for Baylor to come into this game and say, hey, we are what we think to be is the best team in college basketball. We are getting to a point in the season where we are playing the last of the conference games, and they looked tired. And especially for a team that was coming off of a COVID pause, it is not shocking to see that whatsoever. It is at this point in the season where you sit back and realize, wow, I have been participating and practicing with the same teammates literally for the last 5 or 6 months. Teammates are probably getting bored of each other and tired of each other, and there are going to be a lot of people out here saying, look, I just want to get to March Madness. And especially when you're a team like Baylor, who has been through so many different COVID pauses, I feel like they are a team that knows just how good they are. They know how good they are capable of being. They just have to refocus themselves and get from now to March Madness healthy. But it's also interesting because if you look at Baylor's next 3 games, they obviously going into Tuesday night's big game against West Virginia, that will be a road game. They take the loss to Kansas. So Baylor's next 3 games: at West Virginia, home against Oklahoma State, and home against Texas Tech. Is Baylor going to go 3-0 in that stretch? Because I'm going to have a feeling that most people are going to say no after watching them on Saturday night and after watching them play and watching the two teams they play, Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, both look really, really good in action on Saturday. So the next three games are going to be very interesting for Baylor. They obviously want to have some momentum going into the NCAA tournament and the Big 12 tournament. I'll be curious to see what they follow up looking like going into the Big 12 tournament following those three games. But if you're Baylor and if you're Scott Drew, I think that you have to take these three games and tell your team, look, the last two games, I totally understand. We're coming off of COVID. It's possible to be a little rusty. It's possible to be a little tired, but now we have to start playing our best basketball. Now we have to start playing like everything we do is going to be carried toward March Madness and the possible momentum that we are going to be trying to build going into March Madness. So these next three games are going to be very important for Baylor. And if you ask me, Zach, how worried are you? I am not that worried with Baylor just because they looked rusty. I believe that there are plenty of Baylor players on this team, guys like Jared Butler, who, by the way, only had 5 points against Kansas, and his first 2 points came in the second half, mid to late. With that being said, that tells me all I need to know, that Baylor just wasn't themselves in this game against Kansas. Jared Butler, he had 5 points, only went 2 of 9 from the field, 1 of 7 from 3. I believe that when Baylor plays basketball, that rarely happens, and I doubt it's going to happen again. You look at Davion Mitchell, 1 of 5 from 3. Adam Flagler, 1 of 5 from 3. Scott Drew, if you don't believe me, even said it himself after the game. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, he was like, look, everyone has their kryptonite, even Superman, and our kryptonite, I guess, is COVID in the break, because it's going to be very rare when we are out here as a team that usually does shoot the three-point shot very well. They shot 6 of 26 from 3, and when you go into Fog Allen Fieldhouse, no matter if you're coming off the COVID break or what, you are rarely going to win when you put up numbers like that. I do think that Baylor will be fine long term. I just think they need to keep building momentum going into the NCAA tournament, and these next three games to end their season are going to be very important. Because look, I'll admit, this loss to Kansas wasn't a great game by Baylor, but it's one loss. It's their first loss of the season. It would have been very hard to expect a team that plays in such a tough league like the Big 12 to just run through it. I totally understand that, and I feel like given the circumstances, people should be understanding of why Baylor lost this game against Kansas. But what I will also say is this. We all know just how quickly the average college basketball fan likes to jump to and from bandwagons, and especially when it's a team like Baylor, who, even though they were very good last year and they have been very good throughout the start of this year, I feel like everyone's going to be like, come on, they're Baylor. There is no way they could be this good. Their coach is Scott Drew, a guy who historically hasn't been the best coach in the NCAA tournament. I feel like a lot of casual college basketball fans that are just filling out a bracket for March Madness are going to look at Baylor in that sense, especially if they lose to West Virginia or Oklahoma State or Texas Tech to end their season. I feel like if they lose even one of those games, we're going to have fans out here just panicking and throwing fits. And even if they do lose, once again, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Obviously, you want some momentum, but at the same time, it is never a bad thing to refocus yourself going towards the tournament. And as long as I see Baylor really start to at least look like they're peaking and start to look like they played before all these COVID pauses, I won't be worried. But let's have a conversation after these next three games. If I'm wrong, I'll be happy to admit it. But I think right now, Baylor is still my pick to win the national championship, and I'm not too worried because this is a team just full of veterans. I trust their coach, and I believe in their foundation. They have been through much to not be able to deal with this adversity. I wanted to talk about Kansas a little bit before I wrapped up on this segment. Really good win for the Jayhawks, and I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Bill Self is a god. And I totally understand. A lot of us like to hate on the guy due to the fact of the FBI and the Adidas and everything that's been going on. Off the court, is Bill Self the best guy? Has he done everything perfectly? No, I'll totally admit that. But at the same time, I don't think you could deny just how good of a basketball coach this guy is. Because remember a couple weeks ago when Kansas lost to West Virginia, it really wasn't looking good for the Jayhawks. They had a bad loss to Tennessee as well during the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Things were really not looking good for Kansas. But since then, they've beaten Oklahoma State. They pick up 2 wins against Iowa State. Big whoop. They beat Kansas State as well. Big whoop. But then they host Texas Tech and win. And I remember saying to myself after that Texas Tech game, okay, Bill Self and the boys, they got things going a little bit. They then go to Texas, and really, that was a game they should have won. Kansas had a big lead in the first half. Unfortunately, they were not able to hang on. But I loved how Kansas was able to respond and take the motive of being an underdog at Fog Allen Fieldhouse for the first time in 23 years, since 24 years, 1996 against Cincinnati. This was the first time since then that Kansas was an underdog at Fog Allen Fieldhouse, and they were able to beat Baylor 71-58. All I'll say is this: when you look at this talent and you look at the personnel and the roster of this Jayhawk team, I don't think anyone is going to sit here and say, wow, this is as good a Kansas team as we've ever seen. But at the same time, what I will also say is this: I believe that Kansas is not bad. They have some talented players, and Bill Self has done an amazing job getting whatever he could out of this group of guys. And David McCormick, the improvement of him has been phenomenal. He had 20 points, went 8 of 10 from the field in 25 minutes from this game. Christian Braun had 11. Marcus Garrett had 14. And even though Kansas, this version of them, doesn't necessarily have an All-American or a guy who was a big-time high school player, guys like David McCormick and Jalen Wilson and Ochai Agbaji and Marcus Garrett and their experience are doing whatever they can to get the job done. Bill Self deserves a lot of credit, and the Jayhawks are coming.